Experiments, experiments, experiments. I will be doing even more of those very soon. I recently got a prescription for medicinal cannabis. Yes, I got a prescription for it, even though in this country it's illegal. Even medicinally, it's illegal unless unless you have MS, you can have it, or cancer pain, cancer sickness, but even then you'd have to have it on private prescription, and even having it on private prescription, you'd have to really convince the person who would be writing that up for you. So I have managed to convince my oncologist, who interestingly didn't need so much convincing because his colleague actually has cancer patients on Sativex, which is what I have been prescribed. It's a 1-to-1 ratio of CBD and THC, slightly higher THC, but around 1-to-1. His colleague has been prescribing this for cancer patients who are going through chemotherapy, as it has been proposed, or it has been shown that it can, in some circumstances, sensitize the tumor to chemotherapy. So it acts in synergy with that, which is interesting to see. It's interesting to see how these patients do compared to other patients with similar tumors in similar areas at similar stages. Often when they compare survival data for different things, different therapies, or having treatments and not having treatment, they don't account for things like where the tumor is and age of the patients and all these things, which really should be, I believe that you should look at, even though there's such variability, look at the types of tumors, not only the types of tumors, but also look at patients within the same age range and compare those against the same who've done a different thing, different areas of where the tumor is, and all that kind of stuff. So it's interesting how my oncologist colleague has patients who are running with chemotherapy to help sensitize the tumor. Theoretically, I always have to say theoretically, because maybe for some people that won't work. Interestingly, cannabis and brain cancer, interestingly, cannabinoids can lower blood glucose. That's one of the mechanisms of action. So it complements a ketogenic diet very well, and it would complement being on metformin. So yes, the combination of metformin and a ketogenic diet is a good one as well, because it's about insulin, not just, it's not directly about blood glucose. It's about managing insulin-like growth factors and associated growth factors. That's the way that the ketogenic diet is supposed to work as a therapeutic method, along with other metabolic methods for brain cancer management. Having an agent like these cannabinoids, the different ones that seem to lower blood glucose, as well as have their other actions on the endocannabinoid system. There's another thing to look at there, just as a symbiotic relationship. So it may not be as useful a therapy if you're gorging on carbs and you have these cannabinoid drugs. The reason I have it as a pharmaceutical drug, and why I've explored the non-psychoactive compound cannabidiol, CBD, but the reason I haven't had THC previously is due to the fact that I would struggle to trust that source, and also considering when I have looked at patents of cannabinoid drugs for action against brain cancer, I've noticed that they've had different ratios of THC to CBD for therapeutic purposes compared to other types of compared to things that patients are doing, treating themselves. And the other thing is, if I have a pharmaceutical drug, I know what I'm getting. So yeah, it's always difficult if you're relying on just what someone says. But yeah, if you're growing it yourself as a plant with all these other cannabinoids, there's an argument that they work in concert with each other, so they work together to have the desired effects. However, conversely, you could say that having the isolated ingredients, if we compare it to a drug like aspirin is the active ingredient, and the prodrug would be something like willow bark. But the prodrug would have more, in that case, would have more side effects, and it may be less potent, less effective. The other components of that prodrug may be beneficial, and they may have other benefits, but they may not. So they may not have benefit to what you would want, and it might not be concentrated in the active ingredients as much as you might need. So having something that I know is what it is and has in this case, the two active ingredients, the two active cannabinoids that we know can work against, can have anti-tumor actions against these types of brain cancer, high-grade glioma, and also the symptoms associated with that kind of disease in that area of the brain as well, and the associated epilepsy, the brain tumor-related epilepsy that comes with that. Having that kind of ratio, I think, is a good maintenance ratio. So what I will be having with the Sativex, which I should be getting very soon on private prescription because I'm lucky. It's through private medical insurance, so I don't have to pay for it myself. But even if it was just privately, I think it's actually quite affordable, which is interesting. It's only a few £100, which, yeah, it doesn't sound. If you weren't kind of au fait with the whole system of pharmaceutical drugs and just the amounts they would charge you for that, it's relatively very, very cheap. So just a few £100 a month. And I believe that the 1-to-1 ratio of its CBD cannabidiol and THC tetrahydrocannabinol, I think it is. Someone can correct me on that. I'm pretty sure that's right. So that 1-to-1 ratio, I believe, would be a nice maintenance ratio for me personally to hopefully stave off disease. I say hopefully because we never know. There's no way of having surety with anything you do, really. But I am hopeful that this can help not only that, but my symptoms that I still have from the brain hemorrhage, because as with the ketogenic diet and all the other things I do, it's neuroprotective. Cannabinoids, exogenous cannabinoids, acting those endogenous receptors, can give you neuroprotective benefits. And it can also just calm things. It's very good for pain. THC seems to be very useful for, one of the things it's indicated for actually is chronic nerve pain. And since I had the hemorrhage on that train 5 years ago now, I still have lingering symptoms at times when my nervous activity can get aggravated. And this can happen during exercise as well. So I'm about to do a 12-week exercise experiment with the Sativex to see how I can cope with continuous exercise at high intensities. Because usually I have this drop-off point whereby I can keep up an intensity with certain exercises to a point, but then I have some seizure activity which prevents me from continuing. And sometimes I can have even a good cycle whereby I can have I can have a series of exercise sessions for a good few weeks, but then my brain just says no, and it kind of just shuts down and makes me really have these symptoms which are quite hard to explain, where I just get kind of numbness down my right side, and very similar symptoms to after my brain hemorrhage. And then after I rest for a few days, it picks up again and I feel normal. But I believe that I can mitigate this somewhat, or at least try and actually even reverse that, stop that from happening, prevent it from happening. If I think differently about this, if I stop that I want to say cause, that provocative factor, maybe, that kind of stress, maybe, yeah, just stop that response from happening. Because I know it's a protection thing. My brain's saying that this is harmful for you. This is not a good thing. And I'm actually thankful to have that feedback. That feedback is very useful because it can tell me what I'm doing, if it's good or bad. So tomorrow I start my 12-week exercise experiment, and then I will introduce the Sativex as soon as I get it, really, hopefully soon. I've been waiting a couple of weeks already, but I should be getting it very soon. That's what the hospital tells me. So I just have to wait for a meeting to talk about it. but it's definitely happening, which is good. Another thing I am going to be getting is deuterium depleted water. Now, one of the main mechanisms of the ketogenic diet that not many people are actually discussing, to my surprise, is that the ketogenic diet depletes deuterium. Now, this is all to do with the anti-cancer benefits of that is to do with, let's try and explain this, hydrogen signaling. So if you think about the electron transport chain, and if you accept the idea that cancer is a metabolic disease where you have incorrect workings, let's say, of the mitochondria. You have mitochondrial defects. So if you subscribe to the mitochondrial defect theory of cancer, you will understand that the electron transport chain in the mitochondria is extremely important an extremely important factor to consider, and you can alter hydrogen signaling through those complexes, that process. You can exploit that signaling through deuterium depleted water, fasting as well, and also with I already said it, didn't I? Yeah, deuterium depleted water in a ketogenic diet, and that kind of filters that water. So in cancer we see high deuterium. Deuterium is just it's an isotope of hydrogen. You have in water you have 2 stable isotopes. I hope I explained this correctly, because I've only just started researching this myself. It's really interesting. So in water you have 2 stable hydrogen isotopes. You have protium, which is often just called hydrogen in itself. So protium, deuterium, and you also have a radioactive form, which is unstable, which is called tritium, or tritium. But I could explain about the protons and neutrons and just talk about it in more depth, but the main thing you need to know is that in cancer you have high deuterium and low. You have high deuterium in relation to protium, and you can kind of filter that water in your cells in the mitochondrial matrix. You can filter that water so that you can help to restore mitochondrial functioning and change that kind of hydrogen signaling network, that gradient. You can alter that, which changes all these hydrogen signaling pathways. Yeah, I want to say, or associated pathways, and aspects of the cell cycle. So yeah, you can filter that water. That's kind of the idea behind it, I guess, so that it becomes a lower deuterium state. And you can purchase deuterium depleted water, which has been depleted in a lab to 25 parts per million, as low as 25 parts per million deuterium. Now you can't get fully deuterium depleted water, because otherwise it wouldn't be water, would it? So it's H2O. So the two H's are protium and deuterium. But in cancer, the cellular water has, or that's what's seen. The cellular water is high in deuterium, very high in deuterium. And we can see that on MRI scans, actually. MRI scans, it's diffusion of water molecules. And then you get the contrast and it brings up this image. And that area will be, if it's lighting up, it'll be high in deuterium, or it usually is. I'm not trying to explain this in a way like I know everything, because I don't. I'm still exploring this area, but I think that's the main gist of it. It's very interesting stuff, absolutely fascinating. So I will be experimenting with deuterium depleted water as well as Sativex. I've ordered the 25 parts per million water from a company called Clavia. I'm trying to pronounce it properly. It's from Romania. And they've done lots of experiments with deuterium depleted water. It's a huge thing. If you were to drink you wouldn't drink seawater, but seawater is about 150, if I'm correct, about 155 parts per million deuterium. And normal drinking water is typically around 150 parts per million deuterium. So contrast that with the deuterium depleted water from the lab at 25 parts per million. You have 150 parts per million in drinking water, and then 25 parts per million from the lab sourced water, deuterium depleted water. That's a huge change, and it makes sense that would change just the water in your cells and the signaling from that. There was a really good article on just water in general that I found, talking about reverse osmosis water and the benefits and drawbacks of that. The benefit is you're helping to remove the chlorine, and if you're in some areas where they had fluoride, it's removing that. But the drawback would be that it is removing all of the minerals from the water, and you don't really want that. So you'd have to, if you do have this reverse osmosis device, you would then have to actually add those minerals into the water yourself to not have any problems from that. To simplify the whole deuterium thing, deuterium depleted water would be described as light water, and deuterium heavy water, water with lots of deuterium in it, would be termed heavy water. Now, if you were to drink really heavy water, you would die within about 2 weeks. I read this. It's really interesting. It was an interesting kind of thing to read. This, that you would die within about 2 weeks. Now, it would be higher deuterium than what's in normal water, so don't worry about that. But it was just I found it amusing in a kind of scary way, but yeah. And if you were to consume water with tritium in, so it would be super heavy water, you would probably die within under 2 hours. So 2 weeks, 2 hours. Yeah, you don't want that. It's radioactive stuff. But you wouldn't turn into an X-Man or anything, or a Spider-Man. It just wouldn't be a good thing. It wouldn't be a good way to go. But conversely, light water, and the effects on, it doesn't have any effects on healthy cells, by the way. So, and it has benefits for mental health. It's interesting when they've looked at, there was a really interesting study on, I think it was depression and depressive disorders, that they looked at different areas, different locations, and the deuterium in the water, and they noticed correlations between the deuterium in the water and depressive episodes, I think it was, or just rates of depression and all these things. And they noticed that areas where the deuterium was highest in the water, they had more depressive episodes, or depression in general. And in areas with naturally lower deuterium, it was the opposite. Now, there could have been many factors for this, but I think it was described quite nicely why that might be the case, how the kind of actions as to why that might happen. So deuterium depletion, very, very interesting. And very interesting how types of food on the ketogenic diet, not only the process, not only the state of being in ketosis itself, the actual components of the diet, the foods that you choose to consume have that effect of depleting deuterium from the cells. And that was just really interesting to read. I'll try and put it down there somewhere in the link. But I'm thinking about all these things, and it's really exciting and really interesting. Another thing is, I can show you here, I only drink from glass bottles now. Always. Without any, what's the word? It's difficult to find words sometimes. I don't have any excuses, so I don't take any. I'm trying to find the right word. Sometimes it's really hard to find the word when you're looking for it. And then when you don't need it, it just pops up. But what I'm thinking of is just that there's no leeway for me here. I'm constantly going to be doing that. I used to drink out of a metallic kind of bottle, but I'm very wary of metals getting into the water and stuff like that. I'm also very wary of plastics, so I'm sticking to the water in a glass bottle, and I'm trying to source naturally deuterium depleted water as well. It's just to kind of when I don't have the lab sourced water. The thing that would make this a lot easier if I could have the tests that you can have to assess your requirements, if you actually need water that is so depleted. Because I don't have any active cancer, I'm just doing this as an experiment. Meaning I might not need to do this. And deuterium is not necessarily a bad thing, because it's essential for growth. and it's also, I think that the kind of primordial soup, the water that we were that we kind of evolved from these single-celled organisms to multicellular organisms was high in deuterium, and the Big Bang was supposedly deuterium kind of instigated, I want to say. I don't know. I'm struggling with my words today. I don't know why. Just that whole process was kind of acted on by just this hydrogen isotope. This is very interesting. So be interesting to see how much deuterium is on water in Mars, wouldn't it? Apparently Mars used to be, well, the theory is that Mars used to be how Earth is now, and something happened to Mars to destroy all life. Interesting theory. Where there's water, there's life. And Earth will go that way at some point. So maybe we need to go back to Mars and make it inhabitable somehow. I don't know about the cosmic radiation and all that stuff. Anyway. What else? Doing exams at the moment. Woo! And we'll be working on my project at university again soon, which will be good. It's on a class of enzymes that misfolds proteins and is involved with hypoxia responsive elements. So in cancer you have these hypoxic areas where that's where all the stuff happens. I wanted to say a rude word there, but I don't say rude words. But that's where you have, not always anyway, that's where you have the creation of new blood vessels, the angiogenesis, where there's areas of hypoxia. And I'm working on thinking about inhibitors of that process. Well, I'm observing it and then observing this class of enzymes and looking at inhibitors of that process. So to inhibit those enzymes in glioblastoma. So it's relevant. It's good. That will enable me to do other stuff that I want to do. And it's quite cool how I'm actually given the opportunity to do this on glioblastoma cell lines, actually in the lab. So it gives me good experience doing this. I need more experience, more lab-based experience. Because I don't know what I'm doing. I do and I don't. Still learning all this stuff. I'm still a novice. Yeah. So I have an excellent supervisor. I'm really pleased with that. And it'll be really exciting starting that stuff. I want to desperately have some kind of input into the research that's happening in regards to brain tumours. It would make me a very happy person, because I can talk as much as I like, but I like action as well as talking. And I hope that my experiments can provide useful information for other people. I really do. So, deuterium depleted water, drinking out of these glass bottles. Exercise, you sweat a lot with exercise, so it'll be interesting. to see how that water affects me during exercise. And there are some athletes I know who are drinking, well, not that I know, I don't know them personally. Maybe I will in the future. I don't know. I know there are some athletes at the moment experimenting with deuterium depleted water. Athletes are experimenting with cannabinoids as well, for performance benefits. It's interesting when you get that kind of runner's high that's actually acting on areas of the endocannabinoid system. There's also papers that show different cannabinoids having different effects on different cancers, and in some cancers the ratio and the type of cannabinoids that I will be having won't be beneficial, and it might even cause that particular type of cancer to proliferate rather than go the other way and induce those apoptotic mechanisms, so to kill itself and to keep things as they are. I think it's true that I'm not an expert in cannabinoids, but that the CBD, one of the non-psychoactive cannabinoids that's used primarily for benefits against various types of epilepsy, the anticonvulsant benefits, the CBD, that's for cancer, that can be anti-migratory, so it kind of it can help to prevent the cancer from spreading in the case of primary brain tumors, into healthy tissue. And the THC is what the tetrahydrocannabinol, the THC is what can actually selectively kill the cancer cells in the brain. But then you're thinking, what's the actual dose? The poison's often in the dose, so, and the magic happens at a certain ratio, a certain concentration. So when is that beneficial, and when might it be going too high, too far? I think that in a patent that I saw recently, it was the suggested benefit was a 3 to 1 or 4 to 1 cannabis preparation of in favor of THC to CBD. So I have a 1-to-1 ratio, and a 1-to-1 ratio isn't going to get you high, because it's the THC that gets you high, and the CBD is non-psychoactive, and they can balance each other out. So if you have an equal ratio of the THCs to the CBD, you won't get high. But as the THC would increase, you would get that kind of experience, like those sensations. And that is why the unregulated cannabis plant that you can get off the street it's usually engineered to be much, much, much higher in THC. So that could be problematic for many reasons. And also that you're not knowing what you're really getting most of the time. So there are obvious difficulties with that. So once again, I'm quite happy to have a substance which, while it may not have other cannabinoids that may act in concert to give you potential synergistic benefits of its for the anti-cancer benefits, you do have the isolated ingredients that the isolated components that are proposed to be beneficial. So this drug will be interesting to test. Definitely. And it'd be interesting to see how it affects my appetite, my seizure activity, my sleep. So yeah, a number of things I'm working on and a number of experiences to be had. I am going to Imperial on Monday, Imperial College, to talk about a few things related to my research and my future, because they're interested in having me there in some capacity, whether it be furthering my studies or doing a PhD in future or being involved with working there and doing more work experience. So that'll be good. That'll be interesting. And it's bedtime now. So I'm having my magnesium. I have magnesium citrate before bed. It makes me, calms me down, so I'm able to sleep. If I have an overactive brain, yeah, it calms me down and it's good. Very good stuff. Nothing else, no other ingredients, just magnesium citrate. I have other forms of magnesium. Definitely not magnesium oxide. It's the least bioavailable and it's the one you get in all these health food shops. But all I have is magnesium citrate, no other ingredients. And that helps me to sleep. So there we are. That's me. Finished for the day, and I'll have a good sleep. And have a workout tomorrow, because it's my 12-week exercise experiment. I'll let you know how that goes. I'll try and update more often. And I'll let you know how my experiences go with my research and everything else I'm doing. Thanks for all the support, and I'll be in touch soon with exciting results, hopefully. If not, a result is a result, even if it's inconclusive. So, yeah, interesting, exciting times.